What's happening, everybody? Welcome into the Pack a Day podcast here on YouTube. My name's Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. I've got one topic and one topic only. And before you go anywhere, because I'm going to tell you I'm going to talk about Jordan Love, don't go anywhere because this is a very important topic, I believe, with what's kind of been going on with the talk of Aaron Rodgers and what does the future hold, and will Jordan Love ever get an opportunity to start for the Packers? Was Jordan Love a terrible selection? I'm not going over any of that today, but I want to go over how Green Bay got to this point. Why did they select Jordan Love? And I'm not going to break down any tape. I might talk a little bit about what he did in college in just a second, but that's not the crux of my topic today. What I want to go over is the process. How did they get to selecting Jordan Love? Why did they select Jordan Love? And why I think it's important to look back at that to understand the situation and why Brian Gutekunst ultimately made that selection. So I'm going to be reading a little bit today from The Packer Way, which, if you're not familiar, this is Ron Wolf, and this is like a weird version of it, but The Packer Way by Ron Wolf. If you have an opportunity to pick this up at any point, I cannot recommend it enough. This literally gives you the playbook into what Ron Wolf and Ted Thompson and Brian Gutekunst and that entire general manager tree, what they look for, why they look for it, their process and everything. So I'm going to do a little bit of reading and taking some excerpts out of that today because I think it's important that you hear it from Ron Wolf and not from me, because who the heck am I? But I'm going to do a little bit of that. But I want to start by going over two different things, right? There's the evaluation of Jordan Love, and then there's the actual process of making him your selection and trading up for Jordan Love. And I think it's really important to separate those into two totally different categories. All right, so let's start with the evaluation of Jordan Love and how they go about making each of those evaluations for each player and putting their board together. So this is all excerpts, and I took it from a variety of different spots from the book, but these are all excerpts from The Packer Way by Ron Wolf. So first of all, this is him talking about their process. And I apologize, I'm going to look down because I'm going to be reading. It's not the most professional thing in the world. I'm not the most professional guy in the world, so deal with it and bear with me. All right, so we begin the process in May when we assemble the names of draftable players from a pool of 3,000 rising college seniors. Now today, that's obviously sophomores, juniors, etc., but you get the point. Our preliminary pool could consist of as many as 1,500 players, and we could wind up actually looking at each of them, plus anyone who emerges during the season. Scouts will stay on the road virtually nonstop from late August through the end of November. Ron Wolf also had his own scouting schedule, which Brian Gutekunst generally has as well. You follow the same routine at every stop. You arrive early, move into an assigned film room, and watch as much tape as you can on the prospects you're scouting. Ideally, we want our scouts to analyze 5 games of each player as a junior and 5 games as a senior, or today that might be 5 as a sophomore, 5 as a junior. You get the point. You also talk to other school officials about the players to help us confirm in-depth background information. If you're allowed, you watch practice. And every night, our scouts file a report on each athlete that they've just analyzed. In January and December, we follow up this work by attending All-Star and Bowl games to have more looks at the player in different environments. In February, we attend the league scouting combine. In late January, we begin the preliminary process of assembling our draft board. And how Ron Wolf does it and how Brian Gutekunst and most GMs do it now, you don't put your top 32 players and say, all right, these are our top 32 players. These are our first round grades, right? You might only have 25 guys, 20 guys in a draft that have first round grades. You don't fill up the bucket and say, well, there's 32 picks in the round and we have pick 30, so we have to have 30 first round grades. No, if they have 20 or 25 first round grades, that's how many are going in that bucket. And then there's a lot of them separated out by A, B, and C. Are you a 1A, a 1B, or a 1C, meaning that you're a high first round pick, a mid first round pick, or a late first round pick. So just because there's 32 picks in the round or 30 picks in the round back then doesn't mean you're filling it all up. So you may have less first round grades than you actually have first round selections in a given draft. So putting together the draft board takes weeks. We begin in late January. The entire personnel department participates. We work 7 days a week from 7:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. with a 90-minute break for lunch. We take each position groups and go through each player at those spots one by one. Each of these prospects has a file, and it will be the report from our scout, the combine report, and a questionnaire that we've sent to the player, which hopefully he has filled out and returned. We also include a write-up from his college and media guide, and then we read aloud each guy's height, weight, 40-yard and 20-yard time, his arm length, and hand size. If you need to look more at the prospect, we will pull out 5 games against his best opponents. Everyone in the room watches the tapes, and after 2 or 3 tapes, you get a feel for the prospect. You give him a final grade, which could ultimately differ from the scout's original grade. If we're lucky, we review 20 players a day in these draft meetings. They continue for 5 or 6 weeks, athlete by athlete, with each player allotted enough time to be evaluated properly. Our system is fueled by one goal: selecting the right player. So that's the system. That is the system that's in place to evaluate each of these players. So if you kind of break it down and kind of add in some of today's nuances, you're going over your initial scouting reports from national agencies, you're doing a school visit, you're watching 10 games on each prospect as just the one scout, you're attending practice, usually a game, you're gathering intel on character. That has become a huge part of it, trying to interview anyone and everyone that you can that knows that player to understand what makes them tick. Are they a good person on the field? Are they a good person off the field? What type of teammate are they going to be? That is a huge aspect of it. They'll go to the scouting combine. They'll go to all-star games. They'll work them out individually from times. They'll interview them as many times as they can, whether that's at the Senior Bowl, whether that's at the scouting combine, whether that's they bring them in for an interview. They have them fill out a questionnaire. They all get together as a team, all the scouts and personnel guys, the VPs, the general manager, etc., to evaluate the prospect. You're now also getting intel from an analytics team. You're placing a final grade on the player, and then you're putting together your final draft board considering all of your positional needs, which means if you have an Aaron Rodgers, that goes into the evaluation. And ultimately, you're going to trust your board. And how do you get to that best player available? We hear that all the time. Well, best player available is based on a variety of different factors. Obviously, your grade goes into it, but then also positional value, which, by the way, quarterback is number 1 on the list. So positional value is going to add into that grade. So you might have a first-round graded quarterback and a first-round graded running back. The quarterback is going to have exponentially more value than the running back is going to have. Same thing for a center. If you're the Packers, same thing for inside linebacker. Those positions just matter less. And if you go back and look at the different positions that Green Bay has drafted with their first pick over the year, you get a lot of quarterbacks, you get a lot of pass rushers, corners, defensive linemen, offensive tackles. That's generally the crux of what Green Bay is selecting with their first pick. They put a high priority on those, premier position players, which again, Jordan Love happens to be. So you're also, again, evaluating what you have on your current roster. So the fact that you have, an Aaron Rodgers on your roster is going to affect Jordan Love's grade as they put that final grade on him. So all of that is taken into consideration when you're analyzing the prospect. And again, I'm not going over and breaking down the tape here. And obviously Jordan Love, when I went back and I watched it, he had phenomenal sophomore tape. The junior tape wasn't the same. There was something missing. He had a new offensive coordinator, new coach. The players around him weren't as good. But the sophomore tape is ridiculously good. Legitimately top 10 quarterback good and top 10 draft pick good. You have to evaluate whether you can get to that or not, but you can see what Green Bay would be potentially selecting here. So you go through 1,500 players, you put this final draft board together, and you stack them up one by one. And if I had to guess, my guess is Jordan Love was somewhere between maybe 15 or 18 on their board, somewhere in that range. All right, let's just say that he was the 15th ranked player on the board. So that is their evaluation, all right? Let's take that and put that aside for the moment. Their evaluation is that Jordan Love is a first-round pick, the 15th around their overall player, and certainly garnered a first-round draft grade for them. Now let's go to the process. Draft day's here. You've got your draft board. So first of all, I want to take Jordan Love out of the equation here. Remember, Packers are picking 30th overall, right? They've got some ammunition. They're picking at the end of the second, end of the third, end of the fourth, and then the rest of their draft picks basically don't have any value when you're trading in the first round. So they've got a little bit of ammunition. They probably are hesitant to give up their second or third if they can get away with it, but they may want to move up and try to trade with somebody if they can. So the draft goes on, and if you remember this draft, I think it's also worth noting here that I think in some cases the board can maybe just not fall your way. And I think to an extent this happened for Green Bay. I mean, 6 wide receivers were taken in front of Green Bay all the top offensive linemen, offensive tackles were taken ahead of Green Bay. The top corners were taken ahead of Green Bay. When you look at what was left, and remember, quarterback, defensive lineman, wide receiver, corner, edge rusher, those are the type of positions that Green Bay is potentially targeting. And actually usually not even wide receiver. It's usually offensive tackle, quarterback, edge rusher, defensive tackle, or corner. Those are usually the positions that they're targeting. There wasn't much left on the board. You get to, once those initial top players gone, and even if they really valued a wide receiver, once really Brandon Ayuk was gone, you had Jordan Love at quarterback. Then it was Jordan Brooks, linebacker, not a position they usually covet. Same thing with Patrick Queen. Isaiah Wilson, an offensive tackle, didn't really fit their size, speed thresholds, what they usually look for. Noah Igbinohin and Jeff Gladney, more slot type corners, not what Green Bay was looking for, not what really fit their defensive scheme. Running backs, DeAndre Swift, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Wide receivers, T. Higgins, Michael Pittman Jr. I don't think they were looking for safety. Xavier McKinney, Kyle Duggar. Yetur Gross-Matos may have been somebody that was next on their board, maybe a Ross Blacklock. It's tough to say, but the board once I think Brandon Ayuk, I think they would have taken a hard look at Brandon Ayuk. Once Brandon Ayuk goes off the board at 25, I don't think there's a ton left that's on their board that's super exciting to them. So you look at your board, and this is my guesstimate. You're 25 picks in, Brandon Ayuk gets taken. You have an opportunity to get up to 26, and there's one player that's left on your board, and he's got the 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, somewhere in there overall grade on your entire board. All right, put aside that it's a quarterback. Put aside anything. You're looking at your board, and you've got a bunch of second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth round picks, and you've got one player who's sitting left up there at number 15 on your board. You're sitting at pick 30. Pick 26 just came up, and you have an opportunity to give a end of fourth round pick, basically what equates to almost a fifth round pick, to move up and get the one guy left on your board that has a top 15-ish grade. You're doing that a million times out of a million. I don't care what position they play. That process, that thinking is really, really good. And yet you could say, well, what about trading down? You're trading down, you're picking up maybe the third, a second round grade, maybe like the 30th guy on your board, something like that, or at least the equivalent of that. That's not what you're looking to do. And I love the process here by Brian Gutekunst. An end of the fourth round pick, anything outside of the top 100 is basically a fourth round pick. And if you look at the draft value board, Brian Gutekunst basically crushed, I think it was Miami who made the trade. I could be forgetting that. 26 was, sorry, please hold. 26 was Houston via Miami. Yep, so they traded with Miami, and they basically took advantage of them in that trade. The 26th pick is ranked 700 points overall. Pick 30 and 136, 658. So they got 42 points, which is basically the equivalent of an early fifth round pick, almost what they gave up just by trading up. So they won that trade. They won that trade all day, every day. So you have the ability to give up a late fourth round pick to get a top guy on your board that you've spent years and years contemplating who should be on your board and trusting your process. And there lies Jordan Love sitting on your board, 15th overall. All the rest of your first round picks are likely gone, or certainly he was by far the highest of their remaining first round picks. And by giving up a throwaway fourth round pick, you can go up and get that guy. Again, put aside for a second that it's Jordan Love. Maybe whoever it was, maybe it was a wide receiver, corner, whomever. You do that a million times out of a million. So I love the process by Brian Gutekunst and the thinking of going up and getting your guy in that scenario. Now, it happened to be a quarterback. It happened to be Jordan Love. It happened to be somebody that everyone is going to call the heir apparent, Air Jordan to Aaron Rodgers. And you, of course, get the media backlash and the questions and the constant, when is Jordan Love going to get his opportunity? And does this mean the end for Aaron Rodgers? That all comes with it. That's all packaged into that little bundle of selecting Jordan Love. But you go back to Ron Wolf, you go to Ted Thompson, you go to Brian Gutekunst. They have a process that they've had in place going back to 1992 with Ron Wolf. And more often than not, that process has paid off. And the goal is to select the best player and trust your board. And the board, and it takes guts and it takes conviction to do that. I get it. And it's not going to always be the popular pick, picking Jordan Love in that situation. But they had a guy that was probably, again, the 15th-ish rated prospect on their board. They're sitting at pick 30. They've got an opportunity to get a guy that they probably never thought they were going to have the opportunity to select. And they traded up using a minuscule fourth-round pick, end of fourth-round pick, to do so. Now, the evaluation and what they thought of Jordan Love is obviously going to outweigh that process. Were they right? Did they have the right evaluation on him? Now, this is a 50-50 proposition, right? At best anyway. These draft picks can go in a variety of different directions, but it obviously raises the stakes that much more when you trade up and go and get a quarterback. But you go back to Ron Wolf, you go to Ted Thompson, they've developed a system. And imagine what you're saying to your scouts that have spent these countless hours and these weeks putting together these draft grades and this analysis and your draft board, and you've reviewed all these players in depth, and you get to, your pick on the board, and you have an opportunity to go up and get your 15th guy, and you say, you know what, we're going to pass and we're just going to take the next guy because he's not a quarterback. You've poo-pooed your process. You've basically said that all of our scouting reports, all of our work, everything that we've done all year long is for naught, because we're just going to go in a different direction and not trust our process anyway. And where does that leave you if you're not going to trust your process and your analytical ability? If you don't think you can evaluate the players correctly, you're in the wrong business. So the evaluation ultimately needs to be good, and it'll go a very long way in defining Brian Gutekunst as a general manager. But what he did in that room on that day was unequivocally the right move based on their evaluation. You can disagree with the evaluation all you want. You can say maybe he shouldn't have been a first-round pick. But how he went about that with, in my opinion, what they had left on the board and my assumption of what they had left on the board, I liked the direction that they took, standing their ground and trusting the board. And had it have been a defensive tackle, a corner, a safety, whatever, any other position, you probably wouldn't have even batted an eye, and you would have said that's a really smart process, and it's exactly what they did. But because it's a quarterback and you have Aaron Rodgers on the roster, it's going to maybe rightfully take a bit more criticism. But he stuck with his convictions, very similarly to what Ted Thompson did with not only selecting Aaron Rodgers, but trading Brett Favre away to move forward with Aaron Rodgers. Those decisions take guts and moxie, and it is ultimately going to be a huge part of defining you as a GM. And I like the process that Brian Gutekunst took. You don't have to like the pick. That's not what I'm here to tell you. I'm not saying you should love the Jordan Love pick. I didn't love the Jordan Love pick. In fact, I wrote an article beforehand saying that I think the worst case scenario would be trading up for Jordan Love. I liked the Jordan Love as a prospect, and I wouldn't have minded if they selected him at 30. I thought trading up added an additional connotation to it, but I understand the process that they went through, and I understand how they got to that selection. Not defending it, not saying you should like it, but I love the process, and we'll see. And we can only give it time to see where ultimately that evaluation plays out and whether they got the right guy or they did not. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope that was maybe somewhat educational. I appreciate it. If you're not listening to me, you're listening to Ron Wolf, who is one of the best ever to do it. Make sure to listen into our audio version of the podcast wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and check out tomorrow's all-new edition right here on YouTube. I'll be right back here tomorrow. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.